Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore. After the crisis in 2008, many of us became aware of some language or vocabulary we hadn't heard before. Derivatives, credit default swaps, synthetic bets, this whole dark market that now involves, according to one academic, perhaps as much as $1 quadrillion. So what's $1 quadrillion look like? Well, take a look at these graphics. These are done by cocogiac.com. Here's what $1 trillion looks like if you put it into a cube next to the Empire State Building or the Sears Tower. Okay, that's $1 trillion. Well, here's what $1 quadrillion will look like. Yeah, enormous. So $1 quadrillion, it boggles the mind. It means that it's the size of the derivatives market is something like 20 times the value of all products produced on the planet. Well, people say, well, if this is so big and has such enormous implications to the global economy, it should be regulated. And that's a subject of our interview today, because there's a big battle going on about whether or not this market will be regulated, and if so, how. Now joining us to talk about all of this is Marcus Stanley. Marcus is the Policy Director of Americans for Financial Reform, which is the main public interest coalition working for stronger financial reform. He previously worked as a senior economist at the U.S. Joint Economic Committee and as an assistant professor of economics at Case Western Reserve University. Thanks very much for joining us, Marcus.
Thank you, Paul.
All right, so these numbers are like crazy. I mean, just to be clear, when we're talking about quadrillion, we're talking about what people call the notional value, not the actual cash involved in these bets. So maybe you could just quickly explain that and then get into just how big this is, and then we'll get into the regulation issue.
Yeah, well, essentially derivatives are bets on the value of something else. And usually it's a stock or a bond, a security, an interest rate. And essentially what notional value is the size of the thing that you're betting on. So the actual amount you have to pay might be only a fraction of that size. But as you said, this market is so enormous compared to the global economy that the amounts of money that are at stake to be paid are very, very large and have extraordinary implications for the financial system.
Yeah, and while these bets are, there's some pool of money bets against someone else who controls another pool of money, and one wins and one loses, it's not really a zero-sum game, is it? Because they're betting on real things, even if they don't own those things. So they could well be betting on the price of rice or corn or fuel or oil, or even as ridiculous as one of the derivatives plays is now, they can bet on whether a movie's going to make money or not. But the thing is, if you're betting, for example, the movie won't make money, and you happen to own a media company, it's certainly in your interest to to see if that movie gets bad reviews. But and even more importantly, if you're betting on the default of a bank, and you're another bank, then if you can do something to push that other bank into default, you make money. And that's actually happened, hasn't it?
Well, there were a lot of accusations in 2008 that exactly that happened, that did happen when institutions were teetering at the brink, and some traders had credit default swaps. Then they would have an incentive to sort of push them over the edge. And I think there are two things people say as though they're equivalent, but they're actually not the same at all. One is that this is a zero-sum game, which in some sense is true in the following sense, that anyone who pays something on a derivative contract, if one person loses, another person is supposed to gain. Someone else will be getting that money. But then the other implication that people draw is that there's no real-world consequence, and that's completely wrong, because as you say, in these bets can create incentives for all kinds of real-world activities that can be very harmful. And also these bets can create bankruptcies, and they create the failures of institutions in the financial system. And when those bankruptcies happen, then that's very disruptive to the whole system, because once a bankruptcy happens, you may not have another party there to pay off on the bets you made, and that can be very disruptive all up and down the line.
Well, and it can also involve people's pensions and savings, and